Life got a little busy for me this week. Time just seemed to fly by and I barely had a chance to paint. Maybe you can relate. But instead of skipping out on our time together, I decided to just slow down and take a minute to paint something that's quick, fun, simple, but still lovely so that I could get some painting time in, because even in the middle of a crazy schedule, there should always be time for a little watercolor moment. So let's just jump right in. Now, for our watercolor supplies, we of course have watercolor paints, a paper towel, and some water. And as you can see, I've been playing around just a little bit with some colors already, so my water is a little dirty. I have a sheet of watercolor paper out with some pencil lines on here, but let me pull out a little practice piece so you can kind of see what we're going to be doing today. These lines are very simple that I have on here, nothing fancy. In fact, you don't even need these at all. I basically just have some lines for where I want to position my flower stalks and maybe some grasses. Sometimes this just helps me a little bit with my composition and helps me get started, but it's definitely not necessary. I also played around a little bit with some different color mixes, but the good news is that you can paint these flowers in any color that you like. I think I'm going to try a sort of pink hue today. So let me just tape my paper down with some artist tape really quickly and then we can get started. Now my lines are fairly dark. I don't know that I need them to be this dark. I'm probably not going to be following these exactly anyway. So I'm going to take a kneaded eraser and just lighten these up a little bit so they won't be quite so visible in the end. Okay, good enough. Let's go ahead and pull out some brushes that we need. I'll be using some of my Craftamo brushes, and I think we only need 2 sizes for this piece today. So I'll go ahead and pull out the number 6 round and maybe the number 1 rigger, and I think that should be good. Now these brushes are back in stock if you're interested, so I'll leave a link for those in the description of this video, along with links and information for any of the other products you see me using today. All right, let's go ahead and mix up a pretty pink color. Now, I'm going to start with some Quinacridone Rose, but I felt like this was a little bit brighter than what I was wanting. So to tone it down just a tiny bit, I'm going to add in a touch of Dioxazine Purple in the mix. Whoops, that might have been a little too much. I may have to add some more pink in there. When mixing colors, it's always a good idea to test your colors out on a scrap piece of paper. I always keep any scraps that I have, especially if I trim my watercolor paper down. That way I can use it for testing and practicing. I think that looks pretty good. It may be a little bit too dark, so I'm just going to add some extra water in here just to lighten that up a little bit more. Okay, and for our green color, I think I'll just try some olive green today. This has become one of my favorite go-to green colors lately, and the good news is that these are the only 2 colors that we need for this entire piece, which also helps it be a little bit more quick and simple to do. Now, because the flowers are fairly simple today, just to add a little something extra to this piece, I might add some splashes of color in the background right next to the base of the flowers. So I'll just take some water and splash that around at the bottom corner a little bit. There's not really a rhyme or reason to how I'm putting this on. It's just loose, asymmetrical, and very free. My brush still had a little bit of paint in there, but that's okay. It kind of just gives us a good outline and we can see the space better. And we'll be adding more paint on top of it too. Now, still using the number 6 round brush, let's go ahead and add some color into this wet area. I'll start with some of the pink color first and just drop a tiny bit of color here and there, helping it blend and spread a little bit. Most of this is actually going to be spreading on its own, so just with a little bit of guidance from my brush, I can get it into some of the little spaces better. But I'm kind of just letting it do its own thing. Now, this doesn't have to be super dark or concentrated. You're going to want to keep it fairly light in value so it doesn't detract from the flowers. This is just an accent background. All right, I think that's good enough for the pink, so let's add in some of the green color as well. And you are going to want to be careful with these 2 colors. You don't want them to mix too much or you might end up with some sort of a brown color instead. So just kind of let these spread a little bit on their own. Okay, good enough. While this is still wet, I might even pull out the rigger brush and take just a touch of green paint and add some fine grass lines in the mix so that these can kind of blend and tie into this background a little bit. You know what? I might even add some pink lines in here as well just for fun. And like I said, although I do have some pencil lines on here, mostly this is just as a guide. I'm not going to be following these exactly. We do have the freedom to add more or less, just whatever we want to do. All right, next up, let's go ahead and just jump right in and paint in some flower heads. Now, I think I'm going to switch back over to that number 6 round for these, and if you want to, we can even add some small buds at the tops of the flower stalks, and then as we move down, we'll create the larger flowers. Again, just whatever you want to try. We're going to be painting these free and loose today, so when it comes time to paint in these larger flowers, they are going to be pretty simple. All I'm doing here is creating a very loose looking petal shape using some of the pink paint and the number 6 brush. I'll maybe use 3, maybe 4 strokes with the brush to create a very simple, very standard petal shape, starting with the inner part of the petal and using the tip of the brush. Then I'll press down on the bristles and move outward to create a thicker end of the petal. Now, I'm not trying too hard to even make the ends of these petals all rounded off and perfect. I'm keeping them a little bit more on the jagged side and more natural looking. You can see that some of my petals even have different values. Some are lighter, some are darker, but that also just adds to the interest and fun of the flowers and makes them even more organic looking. You can leave these just as they are, or if you'd like to add even more detail to them, you can take a touch more paint and just dab that right at the center part of the petals and let that color spread out a little bit, and you'll see that this is going to give it a little bit more dimension. Now we can also make smaller flowers that are more bud-like they're just about to open by using these very similar strokes, but instead of making large, big petals, we'll just keep them smaller and tighter together. Over here, I'll paint another one, but it might underlap that first flower just a little bit. This is going to actually create even more dimension to the piece. But look at how simple these are. They're really pretty, and now that you can do it in more of a free-handed way, you can paint as many or as few of these flowers as you want to. You could even scale this down and paint this more into a greeting card size or something. And once as you've got the technique down, you really can whip these out pretty quickly. And like I say, you can do this without any pencil lines at all. I personally like to have them in here just as a bit of a guide so I kind of know where I want my flowers to go, and it helps create my composition a little bit. But that's just my preference, but you can do whatever suits you best. Now, I didn't actually make an outline for this piece to put in my Etsy shop because I do think you can do it in more of a free-handed way. But if that's something that you would like, just let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do. At this point, I'm just going to continue painting and creating flowers of different sizes and shapes, but using that same basic brushstroke. So take some time to be creative here. Now, you can paint these with just 3 petals, maybe 4, maybe 5, whatever you feel like looks good. Most of my flowers are going to be more side-facing. I kind of like how that looks for this piece, but if you'd like to change things up, you can make them more front-facing instead and have the petals go all the way around the center part of the flower. I hope you are enjoying this quick little tutorial so far. It's good to just take some time to paint even if it's nothing too detailed or fancy. Quick 10-minute drills are sometimes all we need to get a fresh start for the day. If you find that you are enjoying my painting and teaching style though, I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any of my new and upcoming weekly tutorials. Okay, great job. Aren't those the prettiest little flowers? They're super simple. They don't all look the same. They each have their own little unique personality, but they're all really pretty. I think at the moment that's good enough for the flowers. We can always come back in and add more in later if we need to, but I think we can go ahead and start painting in some of the greenery next. So let's switch over to the number 1 rigger and take some of that olive green paint that we have on our tray. We'll use this color to paint in the base of the flower head, as well as maybe some small green buds at the tops of the stalks, maybe some thin lines representing grass, or the stems for the flowers. Now these are all just going to be accents to the flowers and help tie everything together. I'm trying to keep my lines very nice and thin, and to help with that, you can load your brush and then just dab the side of the bristles onto a paper towel, and that'll take off some excess paint and water, and that's just going to help keep your lines a little bit more thin. And again, you can just paint these wherever you'd like. Make sure that you do have some stalks stemming from the flowers themselves and moving all the way down into the splash background at the bottom. You can have some of the lines a little bit darker or some lighter in value. I do recommend having the more dark lines connecting to the flowers themselves so that they stand out a little bit better. And then you can have some of the grass lines a little bit lighter in value. If you want to, you can even add in some loose or rough-looking leaves as an accent, but since this rigger brush is pretty small for larger leaves, I might pull out the number 6 round for that if you'd like to give that a try. In the end, I actually only had one flower that was painted in more of a front-facing way. Most of mine are side-facing. I guess I like that look on this piece. But with any front-facing flowers that you might have, you can take the rigger brush and a touch of that green paint and just add some thin lines into the center of the flower for the stamen area to finish them off. And I think that is actually it. Now, if you painted this freehand without any pencil lines, then you are done. If you do still have some pencil lines that are showing, because I personally did not follow them exactly, I'm going to take a good eraser and erase any leftover lines that I can still see. But at this point, I think we can call this painting done. It was super simple, and yet it looks so pretty. I think that this could even make some great greeting cards, and they would only take a few minutes to do. You have the freedom to add more flowers or less flowers to create different types of compositions. It would also be fun to try some different color combinations as well. You really have a lot of options and possibilities here as long as you have the basic technique down. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you had some fun and maybe even learned something new. If you did enjoy this tutorial, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.